Hello, everybody. On this Wednesday, July 28th, 2010, I'm Spencer Mazik, and this is the Bloomberg Law Podcast, a series of interviews focusing on trends in the busy legal profession. Today, we want to examine the perceived privacy problems with Facebook's recently revamped privacy settings. Joining us in studio for today's discussion is Richard Raysman. He's a partner at Holland & Knight who concentrates on computer law, complex technology transactions, and intellectual property issues. Welcome, Richard, and thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Okay, for anybody out there who may have been living under a rock for the last few years, let's begin with what is Facebook and what is it designed to do?
Well, Facebook is a social network. It's defined to connect people with their friends and family and sometimes business colleagues, sometimes old friends like high school friends. And it's designed for those people. Of course, Facebook is also designed for Facebook to make a profit with directed advertising.
Okay.
So it's for the individuals to have a good time, but also there's a profitability issue there for Facebook as well.
Okay, in recent months, Facebook has revamped its privacy settings, and the social networking site said that the changes are intended to give you, the user, more control over your information. But the changes have also sparked controversy and new criticism from privacy groups and politicians. One of the things that they're complaining about is that Facebook no longer gives users complete control over every piece of information that they share. Is this a fair criticism of the policy changes?
Well, I think it is. Well, first of all, there are certain things that cannot be kept private, which is name.
Okay, well, yeah, let's go through the user privacy settings and exactly the categories there. So what is general information?
Well, the general information is the name of a person, the photograph, the gender, and what's called the networks, which is if they're connected to their high school or college or business or what have you. So those are all public. Those cannot be kept private.
And it also includes any information that is set to the everyone view. Facebook actually created a new tool by which folks can decide to share information with everyone, friends of friends,
Correct.
or just friends. And so what you're saying is this information is always set to the everyone view.
Yes.
What are the other categories?
Well, the other categories are any kind of personal information that people put on there. They can modify it so that it's only, as you said, for friends or friends of friends, or somehow keep it private.
And this is the personal information in posts, right?
Correct.
And then this is probably private by default, right?
No, it's not necessarily private by default. Most of the default settings now are not private.
Oh, they push things to public settings.
Correct.
And so what other categories do we have?
The categories are any kind of post that people put on. They put on photographs of themselves. They put on comments. They might put on. They might look at other Facebook pages, who their friends are. That's all by default. That becomes public information. And there are now a series of settings, and there are different categories of settings where people can be private. There are some backdoor settings, too. I can talk about that.
Yes, please.
Yes. There are certain settings where you can put on just friends or friends of friends, or where you want the information to go. But then there are different categories, and it's a different part of the privacy policy page where the backdoor is if one of your friends goes on to a game like Mafia Wars.
Oh, well, yeah, actually,
I
I want to get to that in a second,
right.
But just with this particular complaint from the privacy groups, what they're talking about is the general information is now public information, and users have no complete control over that.
That's correct.
And so Facebook's response to this was that it's our experience that people have a meaningful experience on Facebook when they share information about themselves. So it seems like with respect to this option, Facebook isn't going to change anything soon, or at least recently.
Well, what they change is that you can reset the settings, but it's very confusing to figure out what the settings are.
What settings are.
And so I have a friend who's a very sophisticated lawyer, and he went on to try to change the settings, and he said he was confused by how to change the settings. So the settings are there. Facebook can claim that they are there, but they're extraordinarily difficult to use. And if you don't get a different pieces of the settings page, you can make some settings, but you still have this back door with apps or Mafia Wars or whatever it is that can come in through the back door on a piece that you didn't even know that you were supposed to set.
Well, let's talk about some of the other areas that the privacy groups have complained about, which is what they call the so-called app gap and letting applications have access to users' information. What is the app gap, and how much information do applications like Mafia Wars and Farmville have access to?
Well, the app gap is when one of your friends goes and onto one of these other sites like Mafia Wars or Farmville or what have you, and starts using that. Through the app gap, there are the users of those entities can then come in to your personal Facebook page and look at your personal information that you thought you were shielding from other people.
Oh, so whenever you download an application, the application not only gets access to your information, but it gains access to your friend's information as well.
Correct.
And so this is what privacy groups are really complaining about. Well, are applications essentially data mining resources?
Well, they are, because all advertisers are looking for directed advertising. So they want women between the ages of 35 and 50 who live in Northwest Ohio who like dogs. And that's the way they can get directed advertising, get a much higher return on their rate of advertising.
Well, so advertisers have access to this information?
Correct.
Okay. Well,
anonymously.
Anonymously.
Yes.
Under the new policy, though, how long are applications allowed to store this information?
There's not a there's a 90-day discussion, but I don't believe there's any kind of a limitation right now.
Yeah, I know that it used to be 24 hours for applications, but it seems as though it might be indefinite or sort of unlimited at this point in time. Well, let's talk about instant personalization. Critics have had a field day with this new feature. What is instant personalization? It's an application on Facebook which personalizes everything for advertisers, basically. Right. It's essentially while you're logged into Facebook and then you go to a website sort of like Yelp, I suppose, or Pandora or Microsoft, then it's already personalized for you. The complaint here from privacy groups, though, is that this is an opt-out function and they want it to be more of an opt-in, correct?
Yes. Well, most of the things on Facebook are opt-out, and the privacy groups say that it should be opt-in.
And it's a shame because I understand that the way it operates is that Facebook actually sends in bulk users' information to these third-party websites. They say pre-approved third-party websites, but in order to not have your information sent to there, you have to sort of opt out of it, and I don't know that folks are really aware of opting out of it.
I don't think so, and there are a lot of people who don't care.
Right.
So maybe Facebook has 500 million users worldwide, and maybe 495 million of them don't really care about it.
Well, Facebook has also introduced a like button, which is different from the way that we know like on Facebook. Essentially now there's a button that appears on websites, on anything from blog entries to T-shirts and web stores. What happens when folks click on the like button? Well,
when they click on the like button, that means that the advertisers can have access to their personal information.
And I know that privacy groups, again here, they're complaining about Facebook also retaining this information. They're asking Facebook not to retain data from visitors of third-party websites that incorporate social plugins or the like button, and Facebook responded by saying the social plugins are widgets. They work the same basic way all widgets across the internet do. The social networking site went on to say that they only maintain this information for about 90 days, and they do so solely for the purpose of improving and protecting the service. But let's move on to another point of contention for the privacy groups. They have asked Facebook to institute this encrypted HTTPS connection for all interactions. Do you think that this is asking for too much? And can you explain for folks out there who may not understand what is an HTTPS connection?
Well, the PS it's an S after HTTP. Most of the time when we go onto the internet, it's HTTP. The S, you'll see the S if you go onto your financial sites, if you do online banking. If you're putting credit card information, and you'll see the HTTPS.
So it essentially makes it more secure for the user.
It makes it more secure so that, particularly if there's a Wi-Fi, say you're in a Wi-Fi area, without the HTTPS, in a Wi-Fi area, your information can be picked off by somebody else tapping in.
Okay.
Facebook it takes a position, why do we need HTTPS? We don't have any financial information. We don't have any sensitive medical information. Why should we go to the trouble of having HTTPS? We understand why banks have to have it. But basically, it's insecure information because somebody else can view it. They can pick it off if in a coffee shop or some place where there's a Wi-Fi. Other people can pick off the information.
Well, and Facebook has said that they're testing an SSL connection, and they may provide that as an option for users in the future. Is there a significant difference between the two types of connections?
No, there's not.
Okay. Folks in privacy groups and consumer groups alike, they're calling for more regulations and restrictions on the way that Facebook handles users' information. Are we going to see new federal regulation in this area? Well,
that's really the question. Facebook is so big that even for a class action lawyer, what have you, nobody can really take them on. They're very, very powerful. It'd be a very, very big lawsuit. So the issue for Facebook is for them not to sort of go over the line. So there's such an outcry, so there'll be new legislation. Now, one of the pieces of new legislation is this Boucher bill, B-O-U-C-H-E-R.
Right. Is it Boucher, the privacy bill that has it been introduced to Congress?
It's been introduced, and it has covered information and covered entities. So Facebook would be a covered entity. And what the bill says is if you're a covered entity, you have to have an affirmative sign-off by the user before you can share private information.
Well, is this an attempt to create transparency on how information, whether online or offline, is collected, shared, and used?
Well, yes, but it would be, yes, but the bill would make it very, very restrictive, because right now Facebook can say we're really not making major modifications to our privacy policy. We don't have to get a sign-off by all 500 million people. Under the Boucher bill, every time something would change, there'd have to be an affirmative sign-off by all of the Facebook users. You had to click I accept or a button of some sort like that, allowing that type of information to be shared. Or anytime Facebook made a change, like we talked about some of the changes that Facebook is making to allow more information to go to advertisers, there'd have to be a sign-off. So the Boucher bill would be very restrictive on somebody like Facebook. And that's really the only thing with all the privacy groups have been complaining and so on, and there have been an outcry and so on. But the only thing that's going to change Facebook is if you have either legislation or you have the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, do some sort of an investigation and make some kind of a ruling.
Well, even with the bill that you talked about, does it actually make the individual's information more secure? I think that's what a lot of the concern is about.
Well, the answer is yes. It makes it more difficult to transfer the information. The answer is yes.
And so where are we, though, now? Is the representative soliciting comments on the bill? I mean, where are we in the process with the bill?
I think it's just introduced.
Okay.
There are any number of, every year, there have been all types of privacy bills introduced. This could be just one of those privacy bills. So until it gets momentum, until it gets co-sponsors, I think until there's really an outcry, I don't see a privacy bill like that being passed. Facebook would have to sort of somehow go over the line. And they have very good PR now. Every time there's an outcry, they address it. They have somebody, one of their executives had a nice interview with the New York Times.
Elliot Schrage is their PR person, and he's very good.
Well, he must be good. And they get into the papers, they get their executives front and center saying how concerned they are about privacy. So unless there's some kind of an outcry, some reason that really personal information is getting out there, I don't think there's going to be any legislation.
Well, and some people think that introducing legislation, though, like this might stifle innovation. Would you agree with that?
Yes, to some extent. Anything that starts restricting what you can say on the Internet, and there are other issues with that I don't necessarily, where I think there should be some restrictions, things like defamation and things like that. But as far as just transferring information around, I personally don't see so much damage for Facebook, because there's really no financial damage for people's distribution, unless their employers get to see it and they get fired from their job.
Right.
There have been cases where people are applying for jobs and their employers actually make these people open up their Facebook pages before the employer decides whether or not to hire them.
Right, and they might want to see if the person is social by nature or whatnot before hiring the person.
Right, or that they have revealing photos on their Facebook page. So people sometimes don't get jobs because they've done something dumb on their Facebook page.
Well, and I have to say that the concern about regulating social networking sites isn't just limited to the U.S. The EU Justice Commissioner, Viviane Reding, acknowledged in June that the EU data protection rules need to be revamped so that it can address the needs and meet the needs of Internet users and also let them have more control over their information. Could you tell us about the Canadian class action that was filed against Facebook in July?
There was a Canadian class action. They talked about a violation of what they call the privacy law in Canada. But it's similar to some class actions that have been filed here in the United States, but this was in Canada. There are two claims that are being made. One is that Facebook is not giving users advance notice of the use of their data. So they're making major modifications, and they're not allowing the users to opt in. And the other claim that's always been made in these cases is that Facebook is not following its own policies.
Well, I was going to say, though, is this a classic case of bait and switch, though, where you amass a set of users under one particular policy and you collect data under that policy and then you change the policy? I can tell you that in 2005, Facebook's privacy policy alone, the statement itself was only 1,004 words. Now it's up to 5,830 words. So there have been clearly some changes there. Is this a classic case of bait and switch?
Yeah, you did a lot of counting there.
Yes, I did.
The answer is yes. The FTC actually has a rule which was formulated in 2004 in the Gateway case, which says if there's a major modification to privacy rules, there has to be an opt-in by the users. And that's the rule today, what was passed in 2004. Facebook takes a position, even though it went from 1,000 and so many words to 5,000 and so many words,
yes.
that there have been no major modifications. There have been changes, but it doesn't fall into that major modification category. Therefore, they do not have to go out to all of their users and get a separate opt-in for that, so that they say they are in compliance with the way the FTC is doing anything. And the FTC hasn't made any claims against Facebook. There was, somebody did file a complaint with the FTC against Facebook last December, but the FTC hasn't acted on it. So,
and heard nothing from the FTC.
So the FTC would really have to make a decision that there was harm being done to people in the United States and sort of open an investigation.
And if there's any kind of regulation passed in this area, the FTC might be the ones tasked with enforcing and implementing it, correct?
Yes, and they could formulate some rules. The issue with Facebook is we have privacy rules in the United States. They're not as restrictive as the Privacy Directive or all-encompassing as in Europe, but we have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. So that protects financial information. We have something called HIPAA, the Hospital Information Protection Act. Healthcare Information Protection Act. That protects healthcare information, so the private information, diseases people might have, and so on. None of that information is really on Facebook. There are no Social Security numbers on there. There's no financial information there. I suppose people could put their health information, but once they did it there, they'd make it into a public vehicle. So I don't know that really Facebook would have that kind of liability. So there's no real privacy law that regulates Facebook. Although we have privacy laws in this country, the type of information on Facebook doesn't fall into the specific categories of different privacy laws.
Okay, well, I have to ask you, with all this privacy concerns and the outcry, do you think it's going to have any meaningful impact on the number of users joining and remaining on Facebook?
I don't think it'll have the answer is no.
Okay.
I read when I was looking into the Canadian class action suit, I found out that 50% of the Canadian population is on Facebook, which is higher than America.
Well, and I can also say that Facebook reached a milestone last week where they reached over 500 million users.
Right.
So there seems to be no slowing it down.
The issue is, and the issue is really how it changes the way we operate in our own lives. And the other issue, and I was thinking about this also, with Facebook, there's something called a natural monopoly. There are entities that are not real monopolies. I mean, they're real monopolies like a utility, the electric company, the telephone company, and so on. Facebook could be called a natural monopoly in the sense that, is it such a requirement for our lives now that to be successful in our personal lives, to be successful in business, that we have to have a Facebook page? So is it a necessity of life? Is it like air and water and food and the telephone and electricity? And it might be getting to that point where we have a different way of living our lives, and if it does get to that point, that's where regulation would come in, because that means the regulatory people would say, well, you have no choice. You have to use Facebook like you have to use electricity.
Right. Well, wow. Well, and I read somewhere that Facebook is an unthinking erosion of personal privacy. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes. I agree with it 100%. Because it is, because it's really the way changes are being made in our society. And it used to be that also, just the way the Internet works, but also Facebook, if you got into trouble with the law, say you were 19 or 20 years old, you got into trouble with the law, what have you, you could go from New York, you could move to Texas. There's a phrase called gone to Texas, GTT. And you can start your new life there. Now with the Internet, Facebook and other things on the Internet, if there's a record there, or there was a little newspaper article written about you, that's going to follow you around for the rest of your life. And that's been a big issue. It's a little digression from Facebook, but people have newspaper articles written about them when they've been arrested. Then the cases are dismissed, the case is sealed, but the newspaper article lives on, and they can never get it off the newspaper page.
Well, because it will live forever on the Internet.
Correct.
Well, thank you, Richard. We appreciate you joining us. We're going to have to leave it there.
My pleasure.
We appreciate your insight. When we come back, our spotlight on contributed content. Back in a moment.
Digital technology has transformed the way we live our lives. We can access any piece of information at any time from anywhere. We can share ideas with thousands of people instantly. Staying up to date with breaking news and events is easier now than ever before. All this lets us keep pace with the world in real time. Yet, have any of these innovations been applied to the way we research and practice law? Starting today, the answer is yes. Welcome to Bloomberg Law, the first and only real-time research system for the 21st century legal practice, created by the leading provider of data and information services. A single search feature with access to legal, news, and company databases provides you with powerful legal research results and a holistic view of your clients, filtered so you know the information you receive will be relevant every time. Customizable legal, financial, and news alerts keep you ahead of your clients and in tune with their world. An integrated workspace allows you to organize your results by client, by urgency, by topic, however you want it, and to share those results with people on your team. Log in now to experience Bloomberg Law.
Now it's time for our Spotlight on Contributed Content. This is the segment where we highlight an article that was featured in one of our Bloomberg Law reports. Today's article comes to us from Jennifer Quinn Barabanoff of Steptoe & Johnson. The title of the article is How to Minimize Litigation Risks of Nanotechnology. In the article, the author examines whether nanotechnology is hazardous to consumers, what tort litigation risks are associated with it, and of course, how to minimize those risks. This is a fantastic read, and you can find this article in this week's issue of our Bloomberg Law Reports, Technology Law on the Terminal at BTLR Go or at BloombergLaw.com. Articles are contributed to us for publication by practitioners, law professors, and other legal experts. To find out more about how you can contribute, please visit BloombergLaw.com. A special thank you to Ms. Quinn Barabanoff for that contributed piece. And again, our thanks to Richard Raysman of Holland & Knight. Bye, everybody.